Hey, Crossroads, Pastor Cesar here, and we're continuing our series on just frequently asked questions and trying to condense the information down into shorter nuggets, shorter videos, so that you can reference them and you have them, you can share them with people, so that we're getting the right information or the more accurate information out to you. In a timely manner. And so one of the questions that comes up a lot and that people are a bit unsure about is about the church property, the church building. And so what we know now, or what do we understand about the church building now, is that the church building is held in trust of Crossroads. Well, what does that mean? I want to point to paragraph 2501 of our discipline. It says requirements of the trust clause for all property. Point 1. All property of United Methodist local churches and other United Methodist agencies and institutions are held in trust for the benefit of the entire denomination, and ownership and usage of church property is subject to the discipline. What this means is that Crossroads does not own this building. This building is owned by the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. Okay, and so while yes, if you have been here for a very long time, you know that Crossroads or back when it was Cokesbury paid for this building. They built this building. All the funding came from the church, but the church does not own the building. We maintain it, we repair it, we care for it, we manage it, but it's all done in trust. Okay, so what happens to the church building and the property, and all the resources? When we talk about church property, everything that fills the building as well, right, is owned by the church, and so, or not owned by Crossroads, it's owned by the Texas Annual Conference. And so, what happens to the church building if the church disaffiliates, right? Now, there are two options, right, to disaffiliation. There's going to another denomination, or there is going independent. And I'll talk a little bit about the independent piece at the end, because there was a bit of confusion, and I want to make sure that I clear things up. Confusion on my part. Okay, so if the church chooses to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church and go to another denomination, if the church follows the disaffiliation process set forth by the Texas Annual Conference, then the church receives the title to the property, receives the property, right? The Crossroads becomes owner of the property, and it no longer belongs to the Texas Annual Conference. How does this happen? First, there is the discernment process, and of course, as you know, we are in a discernment process, right? Then, after the discernment process, the church needs to vote, and as of now, as we understand it, the vote needs to be a 2/3 vote in order to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. And so, if the church votes, there's a 2/3 vote, then the church then has to pay what the bishop calls their bills, right? So they have to pay their apportionment, which is always part of the budget, so that's already budgeted for the church. It's $32,000 a year, just so that you know. It also has to pay its portion of unfunded pension liability, which for Crossroads is about $3,770. Now, this may change because they have to recalculate it every few months because it fluctuates with the market. So, it may not be this anymore, but the last number that I got was $3,770. There will be fees for changing the name or changing legal documents and names and things like that on all of these documents. And there will need to be signage changes and fees that come with that, right? Or costs that come with that. But by doing all of this, then Crossroads receives its church property, or the title to the church property and all of the assets, and goes into, let's say, another denomination. But for example, the Global Methodist Church and in many other denominations, the church does not, there is no trust clause. So you go into a denomination, but you retain ownership of the property. Okay. There is also the independent option, right? So voting to go independent. There was some confusion because I had heard some reports saying that it was communicated that if a church decided to vote and disaffiliate and be independent, that they would walk away from their property and they wouldn't have any, they would essentially have to leave the property. Well, that was false. And so it was probably a misunderstanding or a mishearing. But I reached out to the conference. They reached back and affirmed that no, that's not the case. That if a church, following the disaffiliation process set forth by the Texas Annual Conference, if the church votes to go independent, the same way it receives its ownership of its property. It would also have to be a 2/3 vote. We would also have to pay apportionments. Also, have to pay the unfunded pension liability, which is again the $3,770. Make all of the legal changes and whatnot. But essentially, it's pretty much the same process to vote and go independent, okay? And the church would receive ownership of the property. I guess it's implied, but I would say that if there's no vote to disaffiliate, then or the vote doesn't reach the 2/3, then the church stays in the UMC. The property still remains at ownership to the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, and essentially everything stays the same. And so those are kind of the facts, right? That's what we know. That's what happens with the church building and property. If you have any questions, you can comment them down below. You can also send this video out to anybody who you feel it would be helpful to, or has these questions and is really unsure about. And so, yeah, hope this was helpful. We'll continue our series. We have several more videos that will be coming out. And so have a blessed day. Hey Crossroads, so I forgot to add one last thing to the process of disaffiliation, so this is getting cut in there. I apologize for that, but at the end, once we go through the whole process, there is a special called annual conference where the conference will have to vote to allow all the churches that want to disaffiliate, they have to vote to allow them to disaffiliate, right? And that conference is December 3rd.